I never expected my day to turn into a nightmare because of a simple lunchbox mix-up. My daughter-in-law accidentally slipped my son's lunch into my bag, and when I showed it to a coworker as a joke, everything changed. If you're listening to this, please like the video, subscribe, and drop a comment about where you're tuning in from. He went pale and told me in the most urgent tone to rush my son to the hospital right away. I asked him why, but all he said was, "I can't explain it right now. If you don't listen, your son won't survive." His words shook me to the core. That Monday morning in my house in Chicago, Illinois, life felt perfectly normal. The clattering of pots and pans in the kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee, and even the faint scent of a perfume sample I'd left on the dining table all blended into the usual chaos. I was hurrying to get to the office where I managed the launch of a new perfume line, something I was deeply proud of. My son Michael was already dressed in a sharp suit, preparing for a big meeting at the investment firm where he worked as a managing director. Watching him comb his hair in the mirror filled me with pride. He was my only child, the center of my world, the reason I'd poured my life into being a mother. In the kitchen, my daughter-in-law Emily was packing our lunches. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail as she stirred something on the stove while chatting on the phone with her friends. Her laughter rang out, bright and cheerful, while her hands moved with practiced ease. She packed a big lunch for Michael and a smaller one for me. Standing in the doorway, I couldn't help but smile. "Emily, you're such a thoughtful girl," I told her warmly. "You don't just take care of your husband. You take care of me too." She turned, her eyes sparkling, and replied softly, "I just want everyone to eat well, Mom. Eating out isn't safe anymore." Her words touched me deeply. I'd always thought of Emily as the daughter I never had. As we got ready to leave, Emily handed me the smaller container and slipped the larger one into Michael's car. I tucked mine into my bag, thinking how lucky I was to have such a caring daughter-in-law. What I didn't realize was that this lunchbox would change everything. Later at the office, I opened my bag and froze. Inside wasn't my small lunch. It was the larger one meant for Michael. I chuckled, shaking my head. Emily's even more scatterbrained than me, I thought. When I popped the lid, I noticed tiny white crystals clinging to the rim like sugar. "Strange," I muttered. "Why would a savory dish have sugar on the rim?" My coworkers crowded around, teasing me, saying it looked like the rim of a margarita glass. Everyone laughed. I carried the container over to Robert, my closest colleague. He had once been a doctor before becoming a safety consultant for my company, and he was the one person I trusted completely. Smiling, I held it up. "Look at this, Robert. Emily must think Michael works so hard she wants him to gain weight. Sugar on the rim of a savory meal." I expected him to laugh, but instead his face drained of color. He tilted the container under the fluorescent light, rubbed the rim with his finger, and stared at it in shock. "Who made this meal?" he asked in a low, serious voice. Confused, I answered, "My daughter-in-law. She always prepares lunch for both of us. She must have mixed up the containers." Robert's eyes filled with alarm. He leaned closer and whispered urgently, "You need to take your son to the hospital right now." His voice cut through me like a knife. My blood ran cold. The office went silent. Everyone stared, not understanding. My throat tightened. "Why? Robert, explain," I demanded. But he just shook his head. His voice trembled. "I can't explain it yet. Just do as I say or your son won't survive." He gripped my hand, his eyes red. "Those white crystals are not sugar. I would never joke about this. You have to move, now." His urgency jolted me awake. I didn't fully understand, but my instincts screamed that he was right. My hands shook as I slipped the container into a plastic bag, treating it like evidence of a crime. Robert pushed me toward the door. "Go. Don't waste a second." Outside, I called my driver, Mr. Harris, who had worked for my family for decades. "Straight to the medical center," I ordered as I slid into the car. He glanced at me in the mirror but asked no questions. "Faster, Harris," I rasped. The streets of Chicago bustled as usual. Cabs rushing by, vendors shouting, sunlight glinting off glass buildings. But it all felt distant, like I was trapped in another world, one filled only with dread. When we reached the Northwestern Memorial Hospital, I clutched the bag tightly as I walked inside. At the reception desk, a young nurse in thick glasses blinked in surprise when I said, "I need this food analyzed. There's something dangerous in it." She hesitated, but the phone rang and I recognized Robert's voice on the other end, urgent and commanding. The nurse scribbled a note and told me, "All right, ma'am. The lab will take it right away." A man in a lab coat collected the container and I was guided to a waiting room. The hallways smelled of disinfectant, filled with the shuffle of footsteps and the drone of announcements over the PA. I sat with my hands clenched together, staring at the clock. Every tick dragged like an eternity. Memories of my son kept flashing in my mind. I saw little Michael running through the park with his tiny hand wrapped around mine. Then I saw him years later standing tall on the stage with his college diploma, smiling like the whole world belonged to him. More recently, I remembered him sitting on the couch, rubbing his stomach, his voice tired and weak. "It's just stress from work, Mom." I believed him back then. What else could it be? But now Robert's words haunted me, "Or your son won't survive." My chest felt like it was caving in. Who would want to hurt Michael? My hard-working, good-hearted boy? I pulled out my phone and called him. The line rang and rang, but no answer. He was probably still in that important meeting, but the silence was unbearable. My fingers trembled as I typed out a message. "Michael, please get a medical checkup today in secret. Don't tell anyone, not even Emily." I pressed send and stared at the screen, praying for a reply. Nothing. My anxiety kept building, drowning me like a rising tide. After what felt like forever, a young doctor finally came out of the lab. His badge read Dr. Daniel Carter. His face was serious, but his eyes carried kindness. "You're the one who brought the food container?" he asked, holding a sheet of paper. I nodded, my heart racing. He sat beside me and spoke slowly. "The sample tested positive for arsenic. It's extremely toxic. Long-term exposure damages the stomach, liver, kidneys, and can even be fatal." The word arsenic stabbed into my brain. I froze, unable to breathe, unable to speak. Dr. Carter went on, his voice grave. "Fatigue, stomach pain, nausea. Those symptoms line up perfectly with chronic poisoning. If your son has been eating this food for a while, the risk is very high." Suddenly everything made sense. Michael's complaints of exhaustion, the nights he sat pale and clutching his stomach. I had taken him to doctors before and all they gave were vitamins and advice to rest. I never imagined that the meals I thought were lovingly prepared were slowly poisoning him. I clenched my fist so hard my nails cut into my skin. "Thank you, doctor," I whispered, barely holding back tears. He nodded gently, laid a hand on my shoulder and left me alone with the truth. When I stepped out of Northwestern Memorial Hospital, my legs felt like they weighed 100 pounds. Sitting in the car, I hugged the plastic bag with the container inside as if it held the final proof of a nightmare. The streets of Chicago buzzed with car horns and laughter, but I couldn't hear any of it. One question circled endlessly in my head. Who did this? And then a terrifying thought struck me. Emily. The woman I had welcomed like a daughter, who prepared every single meal for Michael. Could it really be her? I tried to shove the thought away, but the image of those white crystals on the lunchbox rim returned, along with Robert's warning, "It's something terrible." I checked my phone. Still no reply from Michael. I wanted to call again but stopped myself. If it was Emily, I couldn't let her suspect. I needed time. I needed to protect my son. The sun was setting, casting gold over the skyscrapers, but inside me there was only darkness. Michael was all I had. I lost my husband 10 years ago and built my perfume company from scratch, just so I could leave it to my son. Losing him wasn't an option. Instead of going home, I told Harris to drive me to my attorney's office. Mr. Mitchell, my personal lawyer for over 20 years, had handled all of my company's legal matters. If anyone knew my estate inside and out, it was him. When I walked into his office, he looked up from his papers, his gold-rimmed glasses catching the light. "Mrs. Turner, what a surprise. No appointment today? Is something urgent?" I sank into the chair across from him. My voice was steady, but inside I was falling apart. "Mr. Mitchell, I need you to review my will. Right now." He frowned but didn't question me. He opened a cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. "This is the draft you signed last year." As I flipped through the pages, property listings, stock shares, real estate, I barely saw the words. But when I reached the inheritance section, my blood ran cold. The will stated my assets would be split equally between Michael and Emily. But there was a clause. If one of them died before me, the survivor would inherit everything. If Michael died, Emily would become the sole heir. My voice shook. And if I'm still alive, could she take anything? Mr. Mitchell adjusted his glasses. You still own the company and can change your will anytime. But if Michael were to pass, his assets and investments would go directly to Emily. And eventually after your passing, yes, everything could end up in her hands. His words landed like heavy stones. My mind replayed every little moment with Emily in a new, twisted light. The way she asked me about property values in Boston or casually mentioned my investments in Napa Valley. Once at dinner she had even said, "When you're not in charge someday, Mom, I'll carry on the brand for you. I promise." I thought it was sweet back then. Now it sounded like a warning. Could she have been planning this all along? Could she see me and Michael not as family, but as obstacles between her and a fortune? By the time I reached home, the sky was dark. Emily sat on the porch in a wicker chair, her phone glowing in her hand. She looked up and smiled brightly. "You're home, Mom. I just booked us a spa package for the weekend. Do you want to come? The massages are amazing." Her voice was soft, cheerful, almost too perfect. But the warmth I once felt was gone. I studied her face, searching for guilt, for even the slightest crack. Nothing. Just that flawless smile. I forced a reply. "I already have plans, dear. Go with your friends." My voice came out cold. I walked inside quickly, hiding my trembling hands and the fury boiling inside me. In the living room I collapsed on the couch, clutching my head. My heart split in two. Part of me refused to believe Emily could be capable of something so cruel. But the other part, the mother inside me, screamed that I had to protect Michael, no matter what. I thought back to the day Michael first introduced her to me. She was shy, holding his hand, her voice small. "I promise I'll take good care of him, ma'am." And I believed her. I thought I'd been so lucky to have a daughter-in-law like Emily, but now every memory felt like a knife twisting in my chest. The next morning I woke up heavy, like a rock was sitting on my lungs. Sleep hadn't helped. Only nightmares of Michael, the lunch container, and Emily's smile, which I could no longer tell was real or a mask. I pulled on a dark blue blouse, the color Michael once said made me look powerful, and drove to his office downtown. I didn't call first. I just sent a short message. "I need to see you right now." My hands were slick on the wheel. I tried to breathe slowly, but my fingers trembled. This conversation would change everything. I knew I couldn't put it off. When I arrived, Michael was just coming out of a meeting. His jacket was a little rumpled, but he greeted me with that bright smile that always made my heart ache. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "No warning," he joked, light as ever. Seeing him so healthy and carefree broke me all over again. "How do you tell your son that the woman he loves might be trying to kill him?" I steeled myself. "Michael, come to your office with me. This is important." His smile faded and he led me to his private office. Big windows, city below, the kind of place he'd worked so hard for. He sat, motioning for me to sit across from him. "What's wrong, Mom? Is something up with the company?" he asked, still trying to keep things normal. I opened my purse and slid the folder across the desk. The lab results from Northwestern Memorial, and the copy of the will Mr. Mitchell had given me the day before. "Read it, Michael," I said, keeping my voice steady. He flipped through the pages. At first there was confusion, then a sickening pale. When he saw the lab results, his hands started to shake and the paper rustled. "Arsenic, in my food?" he whispered like he couldn't believe the words. I told him everything slowly, step by step. How Emily had packed the lunches, how I'd mixed the containers, the white crystals on the rim, Robert's warning, and the lab confirmation. Michael sat frozen, clutching the papers. He kept shaking his head as if he wanted to deny it all. "It can't be," he said, voice breaking. "Emily loves me. She loves our family. She cooks for me every day. How could she do this?" I saw tears gather in his eyes. Seeing him like that gutted me. I wanted to hug him and tell him it was a mistake, but the evidence was on the desk between us. After a long silence, I reached for his hand. "I know how hard this is to accept, honey. I don't want to believe it either. But think about the months you've been tired, the nights you came home pale, the stomach pain. We thought it was stress. The doctors gave you vitamins. It wasn't enough." He covered his face with his hands and squeezed his eyes shut. I could see the puzzle pieces clicking into place in his mind. The late nights, the meals she brought home, that orange juice she always handed him with a smile. Then he slammed his palm down on the desk and his voice turned hot with anger. "If this is true," he said, trembling, She not only betrayed me, she wants our family's legacy. She wants everything. There was a fierce, new determination in him. I squeezed his hand back. We have to work with the police. We can't do this alone. If we keep quiet, you'll be in more danger. He nodded, eyes wet, voice rough. Hey, Mom. We'll do whatever it takes. We'll expose her. That afternoon we went to the precinct to see Inspector Lewis, a man I'd met once at a seminar. He was middle-aged, with streaks of gray at his temples and a no-nonsense look. We told him the whole story. The lunchbox, the crystals, the lab results, Michael's symptoms. He listened, taking notes, nodding when necessary. This is very serious, he said. We'll take the container as evidence. We'll set up covert cameras in your home. We'll gather more samples, but you both have to keep this strictly confidential. If she gets a hint, she'll cover her tracks. Michael's jaw clenched and he answered in a hoarse voice, understood. When we left the precinct, we stood in the parking lot surrounded by the usual city noise and I watched my son. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. I never imagined the person next to me would want me dead, he said quietly. But for you, for our family, I'll be strong. I pulled him into a hug. He trembled against me and I felt his pain as if it were my own. We'll get through this, I whispered. We'll turn this around. I'll protect you. We drove home without speaking. My mind spun with a plan and finally a thought from Inspector Lewis struck me. Hit her motive. If Emily wanted the estate, make her think she was about to lose it. Panic will make people make mistakes. The idea was a small, brilliant spark. I called Mr. Mitchell right away. Can you come by this afternoon? I want to discuss changing the will, I said, making sure my voice carried. Emily was in the living room arranging flowers. She froze when she heard my request but acted casual, bending down to pretend she hadn't heard everything. When Mr. Mitchell's car pulled up, I opened the gate so Emily could see him clearly. She was on the porch saying goodbye to a friend, but her eyes slid toward the car and I could see curiosity flash across her face. Inside, with a window open so voices drifted outside, Mr. Mitchell and I spoke loudly about possible revisions and contingencies, about making sure the estate was secure. I let my words be heard. I wanted Emily to know the opportunity might slip away. I wanted her to feel the ground move under her feet. In 1 month, I told Mr. Mitchell loud enough for Emily to hear, I'll make the changes official. I want to donate most of my estate to a charitable foundation, one that builds orphanages for children who have no family. They need the money more than my son does. Mitchell, who already knew the plan, nodded and played his role perfectly. That's a noble idea, Mrs. Turner. I'll draft the papers right away. What percentage should we allocate? At least 80%, I said firmly. The company, the houses, all of it. I want to leave behind something meaningful. Just then I caught the sound of footsteps. Emily passed by with a tray of fruit, and though she tried to keep moving, her steps faltered. Her eyes widened for the briefest second before she hurried on. My heart leapt. She'd heard every word. When Mitchell left, Emily walked him to the door with a smile that looked painted on. Thank you for coming, Mr. Mitchell, she said, but her voice trembled. That night I decided to push harder. I organized a family dinner, something I often did to keep our home warm. Michael sat by my side, Emily across from us. She smiled, but her eyes lacked their usual spark. As I poured the wine, I spoke casually but deliberately. I've thought carefully. The perfume brand is my life's work, but I want it tied to something bigger. Donating my assets to charity gives me peace. Emily nodded quickly, pretending to agree. That's wonderful, Mom. Truly. But I saw her nails dig into the glass she held. Michael joined in, his voice steady. That's inspiring, Mom. I think it's important the brand carries a humanitarian image in the future. Emily dropped her gaze, lips pressed tight. At the end of dinner she excused herself. I've got a late spa appointment. I'll be home late. Purse in hand she rushed out. I cleared the table slowly, then stepped through the garden, only to hear her voice, low and hurried, on the phone. We can't wait another month. We have to act now. My blood ran cold. I coughed loudly and stepped forward as if I hadn't heard a word. Emily spun around, eyes wide. My appointment was rescheduled to tomorrow morning. I'm just tired, she said quickly. I smiled calmly. Then rest, my dear. Don't push yourself. But inside I knew she was unraveling. Later, passing her room, I saw her silhouette pacing behind the curtain, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was sharp, urgent. I need to act before the old lady signs the new will. I shut my door, my pulse racing. The trap was working. The following days at home felt like walking a tightrope. Michael and I acted normal, but inside we were bracing for every step. One morning as I poured coffee, Michael came into the kitchen, weary. He rubbed his forehead and whispered, "The food Emily's been making tastes strange. Yesterday's soup was bitter, and the orange juice had a cloudy layer. I don't know, but..." His words pierced me. I gripped his hand. "Don't eat anything she makes. I'll handle it." Inspector Lewis had already hidden a camera in the pantry corner. A few days later, I sat with him and another officer in a small room at the precinct, watching the feed on a wide screen. The image was crystal clear. Emily, apron tied neatly, stood over the stove. She pulled a small glass vial from the drawer, tilted it, and sprinkled a white powder into the simmering soup. Her movements were deliberate, practiced. Her face, expressionless. I dug my nails into the table so hard it hurt. I wanted to storm in and scream, but Lewis rested a hand on my shoulder. "Easy, Mrs. Turner. We need more evidence. She won't escape." I forced myself to nod, but rage burned through me. Watching her stir that soup with a faint smile was like watching my world collapse. That night, Michael pretended to eat the meal she made. After a spoonful, he groaned, pressed his hands to his head, and collapsed onto the couch. Emily rushed over, her voice dripping with false concern. "You've been working too hard. It's stress. Let me get you some water." Her smile was tender, but her eyes were sharp, calculating, watching. The police secretly collected samples from the food. The next morning, Lewis handed me the lab results. His voice was grave. "The arsenic concentration in both the soup and juice is double the last time. She's panicking, afraid of losing the inheritance. She's accelerating." "Double," I whispered, staring at the paper. Emily wasn't just trying to hurt Michael slowly anymore. She wanted him gone before I could sign the new will. After that, I noticed everything. She always served Michael first, setting the glass or bowl directly in front of him. Once I asked her to bring me juice instead. Her hands shook as she poured. "Here you go, Mom," she said, avoiding my eyes. I smiled sweetly. "Thank you, dear, but I'll just have water." She froze, then nodded with a forced grin. Another night she brought soup to the table, setting it in front of Michael. "My love. I made this just for you." I gave Michael a subtle glance, then said lightly, "I'll just have broth. Let your husband enjoy that." Emily's smile faltered for a moment. "Of course," she murmured and turned away. With every refusal, every small act, I tightened the trap. Michael played his role too, looking weaker at work, rubbing his stomach, sighing at home. I could see Emily watching him, satisfied, believing the poison was working. It broke my heart to see him pretend to know he was suffering inside, not from poison but from betrayal. Late that night, I passed the hallway and froze at the sound of her whispering on the phone. I pressed against the wall, straining to hear. "Just a few more days and I'll be the only one who gets everything," Emily whispered one night, her voice low but steady with determination. My stomach dropped. Quietly, I slipped my phone from my pocket, hit record, and held it still. Her words came through clearly, and I knew I had captured another crucial piece of evidence. Back in my room, I sent the file straight to Inspector Lewis with a single message. "We're almost at the end." The very next morning, Lewis called Michael and me to the precinct. When we stepped into his office, his sharp eyes studied us, though his voice stayed calm. "We already have enough evidence to arrest her," he said, "but to make sure she can't deny it, we need one last strike. A fake death. Michael's fake death. It'll force her to drop her guard and confess." I looked at my son. His fists clenched, his jaw tightened, but finally he nodded. "I'll do it," he said hoarsely. "If we wait any longer, she'll keep trying. And you'll be in danger too, Mom." My chest ached. I was proud of his courage, but it killed me to see him broken by betrayal. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I'm here, Michael. We'll get through this." Lewis led us to a conference room where the plan was carefully laid out. The police coordinated with Northwestern Memorial Hospital, setting up a special room wired with hidden cameras. Dr. Laura Wilson, an old colleague of Lewis, agreed to help. She prepared a fake medical file with a diagnosis of severe arsenic poisoning and cardiac arrest. 4 hours, Michael and I worked with her, rehearsing every step. After dinner at home, he would pretend to collapse. I would call the ambulance, which would actually be undercover officers. He'd be taken to the hospital where the scene would be staged. Every detail was mapped out. But still my nerves twisted. If Emily suspected even a little, the whole plan could crumble. That night the air in the house was thick with tension. Emily served dinner as if nothing were wrong. She set down a steaming bowl of soup in front of Michael. "My love, I made this just for you," she said, smiling tenderly, but her eyes were cold. Michael caught my signal and nodded. He took a spoonful, set it down and sighed. "I'm not very hungry tonight," he said. Emily's smile faltered just for a split second. "Then I'll save it for tomorrow," she replied quickly. Minutes later Michael clutched his stomach. His face drained of color, his breaths came shallow. "Mom, it hurts," he whispered before collapsing onto the table, knocking over a glass of water. My scream ripped through the room. "Michael! What's wrong?" Even though I knew it was an act, seeing him like that nearly stopped my heart. Emily rushed to his side, grabbing his hand. "Pi, love, wake up," she cried. But in her eyes I saw it, the glimmer of satisfaction. The cruel light of a plan she thought had worked. I dialed my phone, pretending to call 911, my voice frantic. "Please hurry. My son passed out, he's not breathing." Emily covered her face with her hands, sobbing loudly, but her tears felt hollow. Soon the siren wailed outside. Paramedics, really undercover officers, carried Michael out on a stretcher. Emily lunged toward them. "I have to go with him. I'm his wife." An officer stopped her firmly. "I'm sorry, only one person can ride along." I took her trembling hand, pretending to soothe her. "Stay here, dear. I'll go with him." She nodded, eyes red, but her grip betrayed nerves more than grief. Inside the ambulance I held Michael's hand. "You did well," I whispered. "Now it's my turn." He opened his eyes briefly, giving me a faint smile. "I trust you, Mom." My chest tightened with love and pain. At Northwestern Memorial, everything was ready. Michael lay motionless, hooked to monitors that simulated a cardiac arrest. His skin was pale thanks to expert makeup. Dr. Wilson stayed by his side, checking the forged file, giving me reassuring glances. I sat at his bedside, tears rolling freely despite knowing it was all staged. I thought of my little boy running in the garden years ago, never imagining this moment. With shaking hands I texted Emily, "Come to the hospital." Michael didn't make it. Hitting send felt like tossing a stone into an endless pit. Inspector Lewis watched from the corner, monitoring the hidden cameras. "You're doing great," he whispered. "Now we wait." 40 minutes later, hurried footsteps echoed down the hallway. Emily appeared, hair messy, makeup streaked, one heel slipping off. She threw herself at me, hugging tight, crying, "It can't be, Mom. Michael was so young." Her sobs echoed, but every note rang false. I stiffened, forcing myself into the role of grieving mother. "Calm down, Emily," I whispered, my own rage boiling just beneath the surface. Lewis and 3 undercover officers lingered nearby, posing as visitors. One discreetly filmed everything. Emily didn't notice. He kept sobbing, clinging to me. "How could this happen? I can't believe it." I patted her back and guided her with a trembling voice. "Come, see him one last time." We entered the special room. Michael lay pale, covered up to his chest, machines beeping faintly. Emily's hands shook as she touched his. Her tears poured, but her eyes gave her away. They weren't filled with sorrow. They shone with relief. Then, leaning down close to his ear, she whispered words that made my blood freeze. "Finally, it's over." She bit her lip, realizing too late her mistake. The hidden mic caught it perfectly. At that moment, Michael's eyes snapped open. He sat up sharply. Emily screamed, stumbling back. "No, that's impossible." I was careful. Terror flooded her face. Michael's voice cut like ice. "Careful? To kill me?" She shook her head wildly. "No, you don't understand," but her trembling betrayed her. Inspector Lewis stepped forward, his voice firm and final. "We've heard enough, Mrs. Emily Turner. You are under arrest for attempted murder." 3 officers moved in, blocking every exit. Emily turned toward us, her face pale as paper. "No, it wasn't me," she cried, her voice cracking. "It was just a spice. I only wanted to add more flavor." But Inspector Lewis cut her off before she could spin another lie. He laid a folder and a small USB stick on the table, his tone calm but sharp enough to cut glass. Do you want to see the evidence? The footage of you pouring powder into the soup? The lab results confirming arsenic? The recordings of your calls, and what you whispered just minutes ago. It's all here. Emily staggered, her legs nearly giving out. She looked from me to Michael with wild eyes, sheer panic written all over her face. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, she stammered. But then, as if the weight of it all crushed her, she dropped to the floor, covering her face and screaming. I just wanted the money. I didn't want to go this far. But she was going to donate everything to charity. I had no choice. Her confession sliced through me like a knife, confirming everything I had feared. My heart twisted with pain, betrayed by the woman I had once called my daughter, but at the same time relief flooded in. The truth was finally out. Michael wrapped his arm around me, his voice trembling but firm. Mom, we won. Tears slipped down my cheeks as I held his hand. Son, I'm so proud of you. The warmth of his hand reminded me how close I had come to losing him. Emily stayed crumpled on the floor, her sobs blending with the heavy footsteps of the officers moving in. Come with us, Louis said, his voice void of sympathy. Emily lifted her head, her desperate gaze turning to me, pleading silently. I shook my head, my voice raw. You chose this, Emily. I trusted you and you betrayed us all. The officers cuffed her wrists and pulled her to her feet. As they led her away, the hallway fell into a heavy silence. I pulled Michael into my arms, pressing my cheek against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, the very heartbeat I had feared I would never hear again. Soon after, the police brought Emily to a makeshift interrogation room at the hospital, a stark space with buzzing fluorescent lights. Michael and I were guided into an adjacent room with a two-way mirror. He sat beside me, silent, his fists clenched, his eyes locked on the woman he once loved. I squeezed his hand gently. Son, I whispered, this ends today. But deep down I wasn't sure if I was reassuring him or myself. Inside, Emily sat slumped at a metal table, her hair tangled, hands cuffed. Sweat dotted her forehead. Louis's voice was soft but razor-sharp. Mrs. Turner, we don't want to drag this out. Just tell the truth. Why did you do it? Emily lifted her head, her eyes darting wildly. I didn't do anything, she shouted, though her voice trembled. You're twisting this to frame me. It sounded less like defiance and more like she was trying to convince herself. Louis didn't flinch. He pulled a small glass bottle from a bag and set it on the table. His voice was calm but carried a crushing weight. Then tell me, what's this? Salt? Sugar? Or arsenic? Emily stared at the bottle, her lips trembling but no words came out. She bit down hard, her knuckles whitening as she clenched her hands. Beside me, Michael's breath quickened, his fists shaking. I laid a hand on his shoulder. Easy, son, I whispered, though I was fighting the same fury boiling in my chest. The door opened and a doctor stepped in, holding a stack of papers. These are the test results from the soup and juice samples collected at your home, he said clearly. His eyes locked on Emily. The arsenic levels were enough to kill a healthy adult in a very short time. Emily shook her head and let out a hollow laugh. No, it's not true. I was just giving him vitamins. Michael was tired. I wanted to help him feel better. But even she didn't sound convinced. Louis ignored her excuses. He pressed a button and the screen flickered to life. The hidden camera footage filled the monitor. Emily in the kitchen pouring powder into the soup, stirring casually as if it were nothing more than seasoning. Her face cold, unflinching. Beside me, Michael let out a muffled groan. He buried his face in his hands, unable to watch the proof of his wife's betrayal. I squeezed his hand silently, forcing myself to stay strong for him. Louis leaned in closer, his voice quiet but cutting. Do you have anything left to say? Emily's eyes darted frantically. Her lips parted but no words came. She just shook her head, trembling. Sweat rolled down Emily's cheeks. I don't know anything about arsenic, she stammered. Inspector Louis nodded to the officer beside him, who pressed play on a recorder. Emily's voice filled the room, cold and unmistakable. Just a few more days and I'll be the only one who gets everything. It was the recording I had captured the night before. Emily froze. Her face went pale as if she'd been slapped. That's not me, she cried, but her words had no conviction. Beside me, Michael shot up from his chair, his fists balled tight, his face red with rage. "Mom, I can't take this anymore," he cried, ready to burst into the room. I grabbed him, pulling him into my arms. "Son, let the police finish their job. She can't deny it anymore." I could feel his body trembling. It wasn't just anger, it was heartbreak. The woman he had loved, the woman he had trusted, sat on the other side of that mirror, trapped by her own lies. Lewis's voice cut through the air, steady as ever. "Mrs. Turner, there's more." He laid my will and estate documents on the table, tapping the clause that changed everything. "You knew that if Michael died before his mother, you'd inherit everything. Didn't you?" Emily's eyes widened. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Lewis pressed harder. "You planned this. You started with small doses, then increased them once you realized your mother-in-law intended to donate her fortune to charity." Emily broke, sobbing loudly. But her tears weren't born of guilt. They were hot with fury. "It's her fault," she screamed, pointing toward the glass as if she could see me. "If that old woman hadn't announced the donation, I wouldn't have had to rush. She forced me." Her words pierced me like a blade. My chest tightened, my world tilted. Emily hadn't just tried to murder my son, she blamed me for driving her to it. Michael wrapped his arms around me. His voice shook. "Mom, don't listen to her. She doesn't deserve your pain." Lewis gave a brief nod and signed the order for preventive detention on the spot. "Emily Turner, you will be transferred to the Central Precinct for further investigation." His tone carried not a shred of compassion. Emily collapsed in her chair, sobbing into her hands, but no one in the room reacted. 2 officers pulled her to her feet. Her heavy footsteps echoed down the hospital hallway until they faded completely. Michael and I stayed behind, our eyes fixed on the empty table and the folder of documents still lying there. Silence pressed down on us, but I held my son's hand, feeling the steady beat of life in his pulse. The next morning, we walked into Chicago's police headquarters where Emily had been taken for her official statement. The building smelled of stale coffee and old paper. Michael's fingers tightened around mine as we followed an officer into a small witness room. His face was still drawn from the night before, but there was a new steel in his gaze. "Mom," he whispered, "this ends today, right?" I nodded. "Son, we'll end this nightmare." Through the glass wall, we watched as they brought Emily into the interrogation room. Her head hung low, wrists cuffed, hair a tangled mess hiding her face. Gone was the polished, confident woman I had once admired. Her silk blouse was wrinkled, her eyes swollen with exhaustion. She no longer looked like family, she looked like a stranger who had nearly taken everything from me. Her public defender arrived, setting down his briefcase. He leaned close and said quietly, "Mrs. Turner, I strongly advise you to cooperate. The evidence against you is overwhelming." Emily's eyes darted upward, wild and panicked. But then her shoulders slumped. In a broken whisper she said, "I'll tell you everything. I can't hide anymore." The words froze me in place. Michael inhaled sharply, his fists clenching again. I steadied him with a hand on his shoulder, though my own body trembled. We were about to hear the truth in her own voice. Her confession began haltingly but clear enough to twist my stomach. "I researched arsenic online on hidden forums. I learned that in small doses it's hard to detect. I bought it from a black market dealer on the edge of the city." She swallowed hard. "I started slipping it into Michael's meals, just a little each day." My blood ran cold. The image of her in the kitchen, sprinkling that powder into the soup, flared vividly in my mind. "I didn't want him to die too fast," she went on, her voice quivering. "I wanted him to grow weak so people would think he was sick. Then when he was gone, I'd inherit everything. After that..." She stopped, her eyes flicking toward the glass wall as if she knew exactly where I was sitting. "After that, I would find a way to deal with her. For the lady to pass away naturally," Emily muttered. Michael leapt up, slamming his hand on the table. "You wanted to kill her too? You wanted to kill my mom." His face flushed, his eyes burning. I pulled him back down, wrapping my arms tightly around him. "Son, calm down. She can't touch us anymore." But inside my heart shattered. Emily hadn't just tried to take my son, she had set her sights on me as well, all for her endless hunger for money. Inspector Lewis kept his composure, jotting down notes. His voice stayed steady. "So what was your motive? Was it just the money?" Emily nodded, tears streaking down her cheeks, though not a drop of remorse showed in her eyes. I had nothing, she said bitterly. I grew up poor. When I married Michael, I thought my life would finally change. But then she, her voice dripped with venom, announced she was giving her entire fortune to charity. I couldn't let that happen. I covered my face, tears spilling silently. Once I had believed Emily was the perfect daughter-in-law. I had trusted her. But the truth now lay bare, raw as an open wound. The police documented every word. Emily's own lawyer sat silent, knowing his client had condemned herself. Finally, Lewis signed the warrant, his tone firm. You will be transferred to the detention center. Attempted murder is no minor matter. Emily crumbled, sobbing into her hands. But the officers were unmoved. They pulled her up, her heavy footsteps echoing down the hall until she disappeared from sight. Michael and I sat in silence, staring through the two-way mirror at the empty table, the stack of documents still resting there. Hours later, the story broke across Chicago. Headlines screamed, "Young socialite arrested for poisoning husband to inherit fortune." My phone buzzed nonstop as I read the words, still stunned it was real. The firm where Michael worked as managing director took a hard hit. Stocks tumbled, but the board moved quickly. They faced the public, told the truth, and steadied the storm. Meanwhile, my perfume brand received a very different kind of attention. What had started as a fake plan became real. I created a foundation dedicated to helping women who suffered abuse behind closed doors. I wanted to turn our pain into purpose so no mother, no son would have to live through what we had. Michael's recovery came slowly, but with each test, the arsenic traces faded. His doctors told us he would heal fully. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you've been through something like this, share your story in the comments.